Hello, welcome to this next video, how to write slope-intercept form of equations of the line through two given points. So sometimes you're going to be given a set of coordinates, and it's going to ask you to write an equation slope-intercept form. And again, slope-intercept form is y equals mx plus b, where this is the slope, and this right here is the y-intercept. You have to understand that. That's the very basic thing that you have to understand. So let's look at this problem. Now, we had a problem like this on the last lesson that we did, or depending on when you watch this video, you may not even be in my class and be watching this video, but we did a lesson where we plotted things on a graph. And we learned that sometimes it's not easy to figure out an equation from a graph. Sometimes the data points are just really odd. Sometimes they're really large. So if we had a graph, the graph would be super large, and it's just not practical. Then we also created an XY table, and we learned that sometimes an XY table takes quite a bit of time as well, and it may not be the easiest thing to do. Then what we did was you went through a series of videos that guided you on how to do this. And we talked about the process. The process isn't necessarily complicated. You're doing fairly straightforward math. But what is complicated is you have to understand the steps. And the way you understand things is you repeat them. Learning is a relatively permanent process due to practice and or experience. So we want to practice, 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 practice. So we have to find the differences between here. The first thing we want to do is we want to find a slope. And what I always try and remember is y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1. That's going to give me my differences between the y's and the differences between the x's. Oop, let me move it over here so you can see it. So what does that mean? So we don't have a graph here, but if we were to graph it, if we were to create this graph, and if we were to plot those 2 points, let me pull the clipboard out. So if we were to plot 0, -3, that's that point right there. If we were to plot a -1, -5, that's the point right there. So if we wanted to find a slope between those, we would want to find a difference from here to here. That's your rise. How can we do that? Well, we can subtract. Now here you can see it's going to be 2, but we could subtract that coordinate, y coordinate, from this coordinate. And we can figure out the difference between those. And if we wanted to find the differences between the x's, so I can see that one's there and this one's here, we want to find a difference between those. In other words, we can take one and we can subtract the other to find a difference. Now, on the graph, it's pretty easy. But we have to be able to understand how to find it if we don't have a graph. And that's what I'm going to show you today. And we've done these before. So all I'm doing is taking and I'm subtracting my coordinates. So I'm just going to quickly label, these are my 2's. That's my 1, that's my 2, that's my 1. So if I look at this, I'm going to take y2, a -5, and it's minus y1. Here's my y1. Now careful, here's a common mistake. It's minus, but it's a negative. So I'm going to put that there, parentheses. So it's a -5 minus a -3. Then I have to take my x2, which is a -1, and I'm going to minus 0. So if this is where integers really comes into play. What's a -5 minus a -3? Anytime you have those two together, you're really, it's the opposite of a -3 is a +3. So a -5 plus 3 is -2. And what's a -1 minus 0? -1. So here again, we have to understand integers. What's a -2 divided by a -1? Because it's set up as a fraction. Fractions are basically division problems. So a -2 divided by a -1, negative divided by a negative is a positive, so it's 2. So what that actually equals is my slope. So if I put the graph back here, you did that same thing. You figured out it was 2, and you might be saying, well, why can't we just graph this? Well, what if these numbers are like 37 and 57? And this one is like 102 and 212. The graph is not that easy. We just are using smaller numbers to help us out here. So my slope is 2. So when I look at this right up here, I've just found this. Now here's the key. Remember what we did in the last video? If you know your slope and you know a set of coordinates, you can find the equation. So I know my slope now is 2, and I have 2 sets of equations. So let's set it up. I'm going to do it right here. We'll hopefully have enough room. So I'm going to use this set of coordinates. So we have to remember that this is my y. I'm just going to do this, and this is my x. So it's a -3 equals, okay, my slope is 2. I have to multiply it by my x is 0. And then I don't know what my y-intercept is. That's what I have to find yet. So the next step is, what's 2 times 0? If you said 0 plus b, well, if you have 0, do you need to do anything to it? No. So it's basically a -3 is b. So now I know both. That's my y-intercept, and that's my slope. So now I can rewrite this as y equals m, and m's my slope, so it's 2, because we figured it out right here, 2x, and my y-intercept is a -3. So that's how I would find it. Now, as you get better and better at this, you're going to figure out that, especially if these are large numbers, it would probably take you 3-4 times longer to graph these than to simply do it mathematically. So as always, if you have any questions, ask, but you should now be able to do the same process using these numbers. All you have to do is substitute out the coordinates into the new ones. So again, ask if you have any questions. Bye.